Behind the Line Extra for your Saturday, December 14th, 2019. I'm your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Appreciate you guys that have already done that. It really goes a long way in getting more eyes on the podcast and supporting the show. I've got a lot to get to today. I'm going to get to my NFL bets a little bit later on in the podcast. Really like my 5 bets this week. This might be the most confident that I've been all season in the plays that I have. I also got an NFL story and a college football story we're going to get to. The college football bowl schedule was released, so going to talk about that. But at this time, I'm going to bring back Gerald Bourguet to the program. Gerald is a Phoenix Suns writer. He is the NBA editor at The Step Back. Gerald, appreciate you coming on again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
We're about a quarter of the way through the NBA season, and so far one of the biggest stories is the steep decline in the ratings. TNT's down 21%, ESPN's down 19%. I've seen some people blame it on injuries. Others have tried to blame load management, where teams are sitting their star players during these nationally televised games, especially on back-to-backs. I think that those are contributing factors, but I think one of the reasons for the decline in ratings right now is because the NFL season has been so good this year. And there's only so much time that we have in our lives to watch sports. I think they'll go up after Christmas, but what do you think is the cause of the ratings decline in the NBA so far early this season?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any one thing, like you mentioned. I think it's kind of a myriad of problems. Obviously, the NFL season has been good, which up until this season it really hasn't been in the last few years. I think part of it is the injuries and the load management and that kind of stuff. You know, tuning into a primetime game, it's no fun to have, Kawhi Leonard or Joel Embiid or guys like that missing the game. But another reason is just, I think people underestimated the impact of having, this alpha dog, this unstoppable force in the NBA over the last few years, like we've had with the Golden State Warriors. You look at years past, and it was the Warriors versus LeBron James, and the Warriors just being this insurmountable, legendary dynasty, this juggernaut, and then LeBron James being one of the 2 greatest players of all time. That makes for compelling television. Even when going into the finals, most of us who follow the league regularly knew that LeBron's side was usually outmatched in that series. I think with LeBron migrating west and so many stars migrating west, that's also part of it, the time difference. People, even with LeBron on the Lakers, Anthony Davis on the Lakers, people just aren't staying up as late to watch those games anymore. And they've also got the fact that, this is a wide-open season, which makes it harder for the casual fan to latch on. For us diehards that are following the league regularly, that adds a ton of intrigue when there's, 5 to 10 different teams that could conceivably win it all this year. But, for the casual fan, that might be harder for them to tune in. And honestly, it's a little bit, I think, the disappointment of not having Zion around. We alluded to injuries already, but we shouldn't overlook the Zion factor, because a lot of the primetime games that were scheduled were revolving around Zion being available and being this force that we saw in the preseason, and he hasn't been. So a lot of different little things, but I think all of those are contributing to the ratings being down this year.
Yeah, I saw where the other day where Golden State had 4 or 5 primetime games that were removed. I'm just waiting for it to happen to New Orleans, because I think they had a franchise high 30 primetime games this year. And like you said, with the Zion injury, it's kind of been disappointing. But we had kind of touched on load management, and I have kind of mixed feelings about it. I mean, obviously, you want your superstar players to be healthy for April, May, and June. But at the same time, you look at the past, and guys have played an 82-game schedule for decades and have been just fine. I mean, LeBron, for example, a couple of years ago, I think it was his last season in Cleveland, he played all 82 games and then played all the way through to the NBA Finals. So, in my opinion, it's kind of a public relations nightmare in terms of television ratings or more importantly, the people that are actually buying the tickets to go to these games to see these star players. I mean, what's your thoughts on load management and kind of the long-term impact? I mean, is it a good thing for the NBA?
I mean, like you, I also have mixed feelings about it. I sympathize with the fan because, like I said, nobody wants to tune into a primetime game to watch, Joel Embiid and Kawhi Leonard sit. And, it's rough because I can think back to my days as a kid. For Christmas one year, my dad got me 2 tickets to go see the Phoenix Suns. We lived in Albuquerque at the time, to go see the Phoenix Suns play the Washington Wizards, and this was during Michael Jordan's, final season. So I got to see, and Michael Jordan hit a game winner in that game. I got to see his last game winner in the NBA, not his last with the Bulls, so not as cool, but still his last game winner ever in the NBA. And that was a memory that stayed with me forever and eventually led me to the path that I'm on of covering Phoenix Suns basketball now. So I sympathize with the fans because not every fan that shows up to these games lives in the area. Some people get tickets to go to a city nearby to see players that they want to see. And it's a different era. Like I would have been devastated if we had gone and my Christmas present was, Michael Jordan is managing his minutes tonight. But at the same time, you also sympathize with the teams that you look at Kawhi Leonard, you look at Joel Embiid, you look at how much time that they've missed. Guys like that, I mean, I wouldn't take a chance with them either. They are playing the long game, and it's not an issue that's really going to be resolved ever in anyone's mind or something that'll go away easily, especially, last year, obviously injuries to Kevin Durant and Klay Thompson played a part in this, but the way that the Raptors managed Kawhi's minutes translated into this transcendent Michael Jordan-like run through the playoffs, and it got them their first championship. You can say that the Warriors had injuries and that they probably would have won if they were healthy, sure. But at the same time, what if their minutes had been managed better? There's no correlation, there's no proof there that that's the case, but it's something to think about. And when you look at a guy like Embiid, who missed his first 2 seasons in the league and then played like 31 games his actual first season that he could play, it makes sense why they're managing minutes. So it's not something that's going to go away. It's not something that, we're ever going to have clarity on or something that people are ever going to come to a consensus agreement about. But, I definitely see both sides. I sympathize with the fans, but I also see why teams do it. And it's also a different era. Like, guys are just more explosive, more athletic now. So you look at the guys that used to play 82 games, that used to play these full seasons, that used to fly charter instead of, first class like these guys do. It's a different era. It's a different brand of athlete, and the toll that's exerted on their bodies is just more significant in my mind. So I feel like it does need to be managed a little bit better. Not everyone can be a cyborg like LeBron.
Right. And I mean, now you've got guys like Ja Morant in Memphis, and they're talking about when Zion comes back, you've got young rookie players that they're using, this load management on. And I mean, there's really not much. I was sitting here thinking while you were answering, what can the NBA do about it? There's really nothing that Adam Silver can really do about these teams wanting to sit these players that they're paying millions of dollars a year when they need them healthy in the playoffs. And I saw a couple of weeks ago where they're talking about making some changes to the regular season. One of them was, I think they were going to shorten it by 4 or 5 games. They were going to have a in-season tournament. I saw one where they're talking about reseeding the teams when they get to the conference finals. Do you think that changes like this would renew fan interest in the regular season? I mean, if not, what else can be done to make, an 82-game regular season schedule more exciting?
Yeah, there's been a lot of ideas that they've played around with, and I love the fact that Adam Silver is more open to these kind of experimental ideas. Just the idea of a mid-season tournament, I'm not sure how popular that would be. I'm not sure how much significance that would hold. It's one of those things that it would be on the players and the teams to have a vested interest in doing that for it to mean anything to anybody. And it doesn't seem like, some of the players who have been asked about it have kind of been lukewarm on the idea. So it doesn't really seem like it's an idea that would take. But Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think there's much that you really can do about the interest in the regular season. Like football in this country is always going to be king, even when the product is not that great. It's still always going to be, the ratings king. The NBA season is very long, like baseball. Not as long as baseball. Baseball's just way too long. But
I agree.
they're both very long. So they're very long, so it's hard to have an interest on a night-to-night basis unless, the NBA or basketball are really your thing. So I like the idea that they're thinking about shortening the season. I think that would be good. But, when it comes to changes, a lot of people just don't like change. The NBA has been doing it this way for so long. So it's good that they're looking at little things that they can tweak here and there, but I honestly feel like the biggest problems are always going to be, these early season injuries that we've seen, the fact that football, the NFL has had a great season so far, and, all this load management talk is really overshadowing, it's been a wide open and fun season so far.
Last week on the podcast, I was talking about the Lakers, and, October, November, they had a relatively easy schedule, but I was saying that we would find out how good this team is during the month of December because the schedule is just so brutal. But so far, they're off to a pretty good start. I mean, they lost that first game against Dallas, but I thought the back-to-back wins against Denver and Utah, on 2 consecutive nights was huge. Anthony Davis is having an MVP season. The last time you were on, I said that I didn't even know if the Lakers were the best team in Los Angeles, and I'm kind of starting to reconsider that. I mean, are the Lakers right now, are they the best team in the NBA?
Yeah, I mean, right now I think you'd have to say it's a toss-up between them and the Bucks. I think their record is a little bit inflated by that easy start that they got off to, but like you said, even lately with the schedule ramping up a bit, they've done a great job of proving that they are for real. LeBron James looks reinvigorated, especially on defense. Anthony Davis is having a heck of a season, leading the charge defensively. He should be a top defensive player of the year candidate. And that's kind of where their success has been founded is on the defensive end. They're one of the best defenses in the league. And, obviously stopping LeBron James, Anthony Davis pick and rolls is a nightmare for other teams. They have that immediate chemistry that, some people were silly to doubt that, it would develop this quickly, but when you put 2 transcendent players on the floor together, they're going to figure it out. They figured it out very quickly. I think the bench will be tested as we go along. I think it's done a decent job so far. But yeah, right now, Lakers are one of the 2 best teams in the NBA. They're 1A, 1B right there with the Milwaukee Bucks. So it's kind of surprising how fast they put it together because we figured, they might be a 4, a 5 seed in the West with how loaded the West was. But, right now they're the best team in LA. And, it's going to be interesting to see what those matchups look like come playoff time.
You brought up Milwaukee. I saw something interesting the other day. I wanted to get your thoughts on this. Kyle Lowry in Toronto said that during the Raptors championship run last year, their series against Philadelphia was tougher than the series against the Bucks. I found it kind of puzzling because, Toronto went down 0-2 to Milwaukee before they won that series. So, it kind of made me wonder, is this Milwaukee team built for a championship run? Do you think the Bucks are built to win a title this season? And what do you think of Kyle Lowry's comments about it?
Yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock into those comments. I think if you look at those 2 series for the Raptors, there's the obvious fact that the Raptors or the Sixers took them to 7 games, and that 7th game came down to an all-time memorable kind of lucky shot.
The 4 bounce shot.
Yeah. And the Bucks series, they went up 2-0, and then the rest of the series, Toronto just pretty much dominated once they switched Kawhi onto Giannis. So I think they had the luxury of a better matchup against the Sixers. They didn't have an answer for Embiid. Against the Bucks, Kawhi was able to check Giannis and outplay him, and that's what turned the tide in that series. So I think he was just probably stating simple facts. I do think if you look at the Bucks now, obviously not having Malcolm Brogdon and watching him flourish in Indiana kind of stings a little bit. But, but they're still really good. And how many games have they won in a row now? 16, something like that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, like they're on a tear, and Giannis is somehow even better than he was last year, which is terrifying. Like the 3-point shot is still coming along, but it's showing progress. He's been as efficient as ever in his career. Like that is a very scary team, and especially for this Raptors team that doesn't have a Kawhi Leonard to check someone like Giannis. Like, will Pascal Siakam be up to the challenge? Will Serge Ibaka be up to the challenge? I just don't know if there's anyone in the league other than Kawhi that can check Giannis in a series. So they're definitely built for a championship run. It'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out in the East in a few months. But, yeah, I mean, right now with the Sixers kind of taking a while to gel, I would have the Bucks as my favorites in the East so far.
You know, the NBA is always better when your traditional big market teams are good. And, you know, right now we've got the Lakers winning, the Celtics are good. Like you said, the Sixers are winning. The one major NBA team that hasn't won in a long time is probably the most famous NBA team besides the Lakers, the New York Knicks. I mean, what is going on with the Knicks? I mean, the franchise is a mess. Is this team ever going to be a winner with James Dolan as the owner?
Yeah, that's the thing that I struggle with, and I have experience with this kind of thing covering the Phoenix Suns. Is at the end of the day, if you're seeing a franchise that has this much personnel turnover, this many consistent years of misery, and just horrible front office decision making, it usually always traces back to the owner. And right now, the Suns they've looked like they've turned it around a little bit because they've hired the right people. James Jones has made a lot of moves that have been criticized, but have made the team better. And Monty Williams has been the perfect hire for this group so far. You need the right people in place, but you also need to have an owner that trusts them and allows them to do their job. And that's where both the Suns and the Knicks have come up short in recent years. Right now, the Suns are flourishing because the new guys they've brought in have done such a bang-up job so far. The Knicks, you're hoping that they get some sort of luck that's similar to where the owner doesn't have to get involved and constantly change things around. Because there's no way to build a stable foundation when you're constantly changing it up. You know, we saw that here in Phoenix with Devin Booker playing for, entering this season. This was his fifth NBA season. He was going to play for his fifth head coach, his second GM, and with nearly his 70th different teammate since he first entered the league. Like, that is just constant turnover, and it makes it impossible to lay out a foundation. The Knicks are the exact same way. You look at the coaches that they fired over the last few years, Derek Fisher, David Fizdale. None of those guys were the right hire, but by not letting them stick around for longer, by not giving them even time to lay any sort of foundation, it's just constant turnover. And young guys entering the league, they need that stability to develop good habits, to know what's what in the NBA, to grow their games. So right now, the Knicks just have a mismanaged roster. They have a team president who's probably going to be fired after they just fired their head coach. You hope that they just nail one of these hires as far as front office personnel, as far as the next head coach, so that they actually have someone that no one will trust that they can move forward. But yeah, a lot of the times it really does just trace back to not having a good owner, having the kind of owner that will meddle in, things they shouldn't be meddling in.
You mentioned Monty Williams. I wish we had him back in New Orleans. I've said a couple of times on here that I don't think that Alvin Gentry should be coaching this Pelicans team. I mean, as a fan watching this team, it just seems like night after night they play with no effort. I mean, you watch the first quarter and you blink your eye, they're down 32-12. After the 46-point blowout loss they had to Dallas last Saturday, both Alvin Gentry and J.J. Redick said that the team just didn't compete, which to me just confirms that they played with no effort. I really think that Alvin Gentry has lost his voice in this locker room. I mean, they don't share the ball. They don't defend. They turn over the ball, it seems like, more than any other team in the league. Am I wrong here to think that firing Alvin Gentry is the first step in fixing the problems that they're having in New Orleans?
I don't think you're wrong per se. I just don't think you're right yet. I think he's going to get some leeway until Zion Williamson is back, because you look at what the Pelicans were doing. Obviously, yes, it is just preseason, and that needs to be taken with a grain of salt. But the Pelicans looked like a competent NBA team in the preseason, and the linchpin of it all was Zion, getting him the ball, moving downhill. Like, he was the focus, he was the central hub of their offense. And, taking a dynamic player like that out of the equation obviously changes things around a lot, and Derek Favors has been disappointing. Like, Drew Holiday got off to a really rough start. Lonzo Ball's supposed progress as a three-point shooter hasn't shown up. They've struggled with, figuring out how to implement J.J. Redick. Like, there's been a lot of new pieces that haven't come together. And there's also the simple truth that, like, maybe the Lakers' young guys aren't that good. Like, maybe they're mostly potential. Like, Brandon Ingram has been scoring well, but, you look at the on-off numbers, and the team has been better with Kenrich Williams in on the floor over Lonzo Ball, with certain teammates. Like, I'm pretty sure with Drew Holiday, they have a better net rating with him on the floor than they do with Lonzo Ball, which is obviously kind of a problem. So I do think that it's worrisome that we're getting vibes that, like, the Pelicans aren't responding to Alvin Gentry's message, that they're not playing well, that they're not playing with effort. Those are usually the first telltale signs of a coach losing their locker room. But I think the front office is probably going to give him a little bit of leeway on that until they see what he can do with Zion. And if things don't change at that point, if Zion comes back perfectly healthy and he looks good and the team is still losing, I think at that point, that's when you start thinking about making a move to, make sure you maximize this guy's potential, because the Pelicans know this as well as anybody. You don't have as much time as you think you do when it comes to putting a championship caliber team around superstar talent. Like, yes, they have Zion on a rookie year deal, but that was the same thing with Anthony Davis, and nothing ever came from it. So I think they're going to be a little more patient in their approach this time as far as putting young talent around him. David Griffin is good at his job. But, yeah, they're definitely going to have to think about that. If Zion comes back and nothing changes, Gentry's probably going to be the scapegoat in all this.
Do you think that Zion's going to come back this year? Because, when he went down, I think the timetable was 6 to 8 weeks, and now they've kind of, pushed that back a little bit. And then I saw something, I can't remember who said it on Twitter the other day. I mean, this just could be a rumor, but they were talking about him maybe not even playing through this season. I mean, do you think that's a possibility at this point?
I think it's a possibility, but I don't want to give in to speculation at this point until we have something more concrete. I mean, it's mid-December, which was the original projected timeline. It might have been actually after Christmas as well. I saw some reports early on that he would probably miss Christmas Day action, which, sucks for the fan, but we want to get him right because this is a potential, once-in-a-generation type player that we're dealing with. I don't want to say, the season is long. Even if he's out through 2019, like, there's still 3.5 months of season left.
Yeah.
So I think he'll be back. I hope he'll be back. The worst case scenario comes about and he's not back, it's important to cling to, guys like Joel Embiid, guys like Ben Simmons, who missed a whole year, a whole 2 years before they finally took part in their first NBA action, and now both of them are all-stars, all-NBA caliber talent. So, even if we have to wait for him, hopefully the wait is worth it the way it was with Embiid and Simmons. But I personally think he'll be back sometime, I would guess, in January. I have no inside knowledge on that, but given the way things are going, I think he'll be back sometime in January.
Well, Gerald, I appreciate you coming on, man. You're welcome back anytime. Tell us where we can find your work.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find my work at fansided.com/NBA. That's where most of my articles show up. And then you can feel free to follow me on Twitter for Phoenix Suns and general NBA stuff. It's at GeraldBourguet.
All right, Gerald, man, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Casey.
If you guys haven't checked out Gerald's stuff, I highly encourage you to do so. He puts out content every day. He's got a unique perspective on things. He knows every team in the league. Really knowledgeable NBA writer. All right, let's get to these couple of stories real quick, and then we'll knock out our NFL bets. The New York Giants waived their best cornerback on Friday morning. Janoris Jenkins had been with the Giants since 2016. He's a Pro Bowl corner. He's been a consistent starter throughout his career. Stays healthy for the most part. He's fourth in the league right now in interceptions. So you may be wondering, like I was when I saw this update on my phone, why did Janoris Jenkins get cut? He still has 1 year remaining on his contract. He's one of the better players on this Giants defense, which you could argue isn't saying much because the Giants defense is god-awful. He didn't get cut because of a performance issue. He didn't get cut because he was a problem in the locker room. Janoris Jenkins is yet another victim of this culture of political correctness, of this disease known as the cancel culture. Jenkins was showcasing his stats on social media earlier this week. Basically, he was showing how effective he's been this season. Someone on Twitter called him out and asked why his effectiveness wasn't translating to wins on the field, which is a fair question. So Jenkins calls the guy a retard. Giants coach Pat Shurmur met with him to discuss the incident, and Janoris Jenkins basically said that he's not going to apologize because he didn't feel he had done anything wrong. He says that word is a part of his culture. So Pat Shurmur decides to let him go. Goodbye. You're gone. This really aggravates me. I'm a huge proponent of free speech. I feel like everyone should be free to speak their mind for multiple reasons. The first of which, if you start silencing people for what is deemed, quote, offensive language, then eventually society as a whole is going to be silenced. Anyone can be offended by anything. You look at history and see how dictators in other countries implement socialist or communist governments. It all starts the same way. You take away the guns, you take away free speech and freedom of the press. You take those two things away, you can control a society. Secondly, we need to allow people to expose themselves for who they really are. And if you don't have free speech, you can't do that. It can't happen. Let people say stupid things. Let them say offensive things because they're only hurting themselves in the long run. Society will turn against them on their own. The free market will alienate them. Now, that being said, I don't feel like what Janoris Jenkins said was offensive at all. If you grew up in the 90s and early 2000s like I did, everyone used the word retard. It was thrown around very liberally. It wasn't used in a demeaning way. It was just a slang term. It was the same as calling, one of your friends an idiot or a moron for, just janking around with your buddies. Whatever term you want to use. This is a very slippery slope we're going down in society right now. It seems like everything a public figure says is dissected and analyzed, and somebody gets their feelings hurt. If something a complete stranger says to you hurts your feelings, then you need to look in the mirror. There's something wrong with you. This cancel culture is dangerous. We're living in a society where you can lose your job for offending somebody. That's a problem. Now, I hope the Saints sign Janoris Jenkins. Line him up opposite Marshawn Lattimore. You've got two great cover corners. God knows that New Orleans can use them. Eli Apple has been on a steady decline the past month. and he has been getting burned by opposing receivers. Now, the second thing that I want to briefly go over this. The slate of college football bowl games were released this week. And as expected, like it is most years, it is a dreadful schedule. David Hale of ESPN wrote an article where he previewed each game, hyping up how exciting that these matchups were. Obvious propaganda by ESPN to try and drive viewership to these miserable games. Most of these games are god-awful. I can't stand dishonesty. Well, I don't want to say he's dishonest because in his opinion, he might love the college football bowl season. To each his own. So I don't want to call it dishonest. But his premise was there's no such thing as too much college football. I kind of agree in a sense. But there is a such thing as bad college football. One of the reasons that football is so popular is because the season is so short. 16 games in the NFL, 12 games in college football. They leave you wanting more. Now, I don't want to see a 6-6 MAC team play a Sun Belt Conference team that's 7-5. Check out some of these matchups. The Idaho Potato Bowl, Ohio versus Nevada. I'm so happy for these players. One day they can tell their grandchildren they had the honor of playing in the Potato Bowl. The Tropical Smoothie Cafe Frisco Bowl. Try to say that 3 times quickly. Utah State versus Kent State. The FBC Mortgage Cure Bowl. Liberty versus Georgia Southern. I challenge anyone listening. Name one player on any of those 4 teams. Name one of the coaches. There is such a thing as too much of a good thing. College bowl season has become mired in mediocrity. Why does a 6-6 team qualify for a bowl game? There are 40 bowls this year. 40. Basically, every team in college football qualifies for a bowl game. It's about the almighty dollar. That's all this is. It's about sponsorships. It's about ad revenue for the networks. It's about money for the schools. I don't like Major League Baseball. I think it's boring. But one thing I think that they do right is their playoff system. Only a handful of teams make it each year. The Major League playoffs are the best of the best from that season. I actually think the NBA needs to shrink their playoff field. Over half the league in the NBA make the playoffs. It's too many teams. It results in the first round being basically nothing but sweeps. Bowl season for me doesn't start until January 1st. We've got some great matchups in the bowls that actually matter. Minnesota-Auburn in the Outback Bowl. Georgia-Baylor in the Sugar Bowl. Michigan-Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. You have Oregon and Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl. Those are the games that I'm excited to watch. You can spare me Air Force and Washington State and the fucking Cheez-It Bowl. And I'm not making that up. There is actually a Cheez-It Bowl. All right, let's go ahead and get to our NFL bets for tomorrow. We're in the middle of crunch time in the NFL. Teams are playing for playoff positioning. They're playing for seeding. A lot of teams are fighting for their playoff lives. I told you earlier, I feel more confident about these picks than I have all season. Let's go ahead and get to it. Bears at Packers. Current line, Green Bay -4. This is my favorite bet of the weekend. Of all the teams that are in the playoffs right now, the Packers are by far the worst team. Yes, they are 10-3. But what's being overlooked here is Green Bay has only beaten one playoff team all season. That was Minnesota back in week 2 when Kirk Cousins was struggling. They struggled to put away Dwayne Haskins last week at home, at Lambeau. They built an early 14-0 lead. Then it was mistake after mistake from that point on. The Bears, on the other hand, are on fire. I mean, we were all over Mitchell Trubisky a month or 2 ago. They struggled for most of the season. But we have seen a different quarterback in Chicago the last 5 weeks. He's averaging 234 yards right now through the air. But most importantly, he has his confidence back. The Bears have won 4 of their last 5, with their only loss coming against the Rams. The Chicago defense has been dominant all season. And they're getting Pro Bowl defensive lineman Akeem Hicks back for the first time since week 5. This is a division game. These teams know each other really well. I just think 4 points is too many. We're getting real value here with the Bears. It's tough to win at Lambeau. Chicago has got to have this game to stay in the playoff hunt, and they're going to need help even if they do win this game. I think that Aaron Rodgers will pull this win out late, but it's going to be a low-scoring game. I'm going to take the points, taking Chicago +4. Next up, Patriots at Bengals. Current line, New England -10. I have a rule in the NFL. Always take a double-digit home dog. I'm going with that here with the Bengals. We've talked about this at length on this podcast. This isn't the Patriots offense that we're accustomed to seeing. This team struggles to score points. And we keep saying week after week that they're going to figure it out. We're in week 15. And this offense in New England seems to be getting worse. Last 5 games, New England's averaging 17 points a game, with a lot of those points coming in garbage time against Baltimore and Houston. The Bengals aren't rolling over and playing dead either. They were competitive last week against Cleveland. Week before that, they blew out the Jets. They had a chance against Cleveland to make it a one-possession game about midway through the fourth quarter. Couldn't make it with 4 downs at the goal line. In the NFL, late in the season, you don't want to play a team that has nothing to lose. They're more likely to take risk, fake punts, onside kicks, going for it on 4th down. They play loose. Their season's over. So they're just out there to have fun. There's no pressure. Bill Belichick is usually money against the spread. That is not the case lately. New England has failed to cover 4 of their last 5 games. In that stretch, every game has been decided by less than 10 points. The Bengals, on the other hand, are 5-2 against the number. Their last 7 games is a double-digit dog. I think we'll see a heavy dose of the running game with Joe Mixon for Cincinnati, who has really played well the past couple of weeks. I don't think the Patriots have the firepower offensively to cover this number. So I'm going to take Cincinnati +10. Next up, Texans at Titans. Current line, Tennessee -3.5. I've been riding high on this Titans team since October. Ryan Tannehill has this team on a roll. Won their last 3 games by 19 points. They are winning in convincing fashion. However, and I've said this all season, when I look at these games, I try to find a team who was embarrassed the week before. The Texans were blown out by Denver at home last weekend. I like them in this spot here. The Texans are the definition of inconsistency. All season, it's been win 2 games, lose the next. Win 2 games, lose the next. I don't put too much stock in that home loss to Denver last week. Houston was coming off an emotional win against New England. They were going up against a rookie quarterback in his second start. They had very little film on Drew Lock. So it was a perfect storm for an upset. The Achilles heel of this Texans team has been their slow starts. They're second worst in the league, only behind the Redskins in the first quarter, being outscored 65-30. They are always playing from behind. But I think Deshaun Watson will be able to take advantage of this Titans secondary, who ranked 25th defending against the pass. The strength of the Tennessee defense is the front 4, pressuring the quarterback and defending against the run. That's not going to be an easy task against the elusive Deshaun Watson. I'm strictly playing the number here. If this line were just 3, I would probably be backing the Titans. But at 3.5, I'm going to take Houston. I like the Titans to win this game and take control of the AFC South, but the Texans cover, taking Houston +3.5. Next up, Jaguars at Raiders. Current line, Oakland -6.5. This is my second favorite bet of the week. The Jaguars have given up on Doug Marrone, and they have given up on this season. This team hasn't been close to competitive lately. Last 5 games, they've lost by an average of 23 points. Everyone was blaming Nick Foles. Marrone inserts Gardner Minshew back into the lineup, and it's the same result. Now, Oakland hasn't been much better lately, but this team is still playing for John Gruden. This season is already considered a success in Oakland, in my opinion. No one expected much from this team, but they have a real possibility of finishing 8-8, which is a vast improvement over last year. Derek Carr and the offense have been able to move the ball. It's the turnovers that have killed this team, something Jacksonville sucks at. They're 22nd in the league at forcing turnovers. Oakland should have running back Josh Jacobs back in the lineup against one of the worst run defenses in the NFL. This game could get ugly quick. This is the last game the Raiders will play in Oakland. It's going to be an emotional day. Raiders are 7-3 against the number of their last 10 home games, 10-2 straight up at home when playing a team with a losing record. This game could be over at halftime. I like Oakland minus 6.5. Last up, Buffalo at Pittsburgh. Current line, Pittsburgh minus 2. I couldn't believe this line when I saw it. I'm getting the better quarterback, the better defense, who will be going up against a third-string quarterback that calls himself Duck. And I'm going to get free points. I'll take it. If you weren't a believer in this Buffalo defense, then last week should have proven to you that they are real. Yes, they lost at home to Baltimore, but the Bills' defense contained Lamar Jackson. Baltimore only had 257 yards of total offense. You've got to credit Mike Tomlin for having this Steelers team at 8-5 and in the playoffs with all of the problems they've had at quarterback. The Steelers are rolling, 7-1 in their last 8 games. However, what's being overlooked, the schedule has been soft. 6 of those wins were against losing teams, 2 of which came against the Bengals and the Dolphins. Pittsburgh's a top 5 defense, but I think they're a bit overrated. They're susceptible against the run, something that Buffalo can exploit. I think we're getting real value with the Bills. I cannot swallow points with a third-string quarterback against what I believe is the best defense in the NFL. Taking Buffalo plus 2. All right, I have a little freebie here. I like the Rams to go into Dallas and win. Line right now is LA minus 1. Rams actually open as 4-point dogs. Line has moved 5 points. I think the Cowboys are coasting until their game against the Eagles next week. The Rams need this game to keep their playoff hopes alive. The only thing that matters to the Cowboys right now is going to Philadelphia next week and trying to win the NFC East. All right, so to recap, we're on Chicago plus 4.5, the Bengals plus 10, Texans plus 3.5, Oakland minus 6.5, and Buffalo plus 2. And the freebie with the Rams minus 1. All right, that's all for today, guys. I'll be back Tuesday morning to recap the weekend. Want to thank Gerald Bourguet for joining us. Hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube. Leave me a 5-star rating on iTunes. Thank you for those that have already done so. I appreciate it. If there's anything that you guys want me to cover, leave me a comment in the section below, or you can hit me up on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Have a good weekend. I will see you guys on Tuesday.